I know every operating
At my
system like
last
the
job,
back of
in
my
my current
hand.
role,
I have
I
25 years of
am
experience and have worked with several people from your company. I've been recognized for my passion. My team is everything.
LinkedIn delivers candidates who rise above the rest. With an up-to-date view into shared connections, skills, and interests you won't find anywhere else. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
Hello, welcome to Strong Sense of Place.
In each episode, we focus on one destination and discuss what makes it different than any other place on Earth.
Then we recommend 5 books we love that took us there on the page.
I'm Melissa Jolan.
I'm David Humphreys.
We're going around the world, one great read at a time.
Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Strong Sense of Place. Today we get curious about France. And welcome to Season 6. Thanks for joining us. This is the first of 12 new episodes, which will be coming out every other week between now and November.
That's a long stretch.
It is a long stretch. If you're listening to this on launch day, the Cannes Film Festival is wrapping up.
My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail.
Yeah. And the Monaco Grand Prix is underway.
So many jet-setting posh events.
Yeah. I was surprised to find out that there are budget ways to attend both of those events. We will have links in the show notes for those. Today on the show, in Two Truths and a Lie, we are going to visit the amazing world of French baked goods.
I'm into that.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about 5 books we love that took us to France on the page.
I'm recommending a novel that might inspire you to deepen your relationship with one special book.
I've got a nonfiction book that took me straight into World War II with a fascinating woman.
You told me about her, and I got a crush on her secondhand.
But first, Mel's going to get us situated with the France 101.
From the Strong Sense of Place studios,
it's the 101.
Some of you may know that we think of travel guru Rick Steves as our quirky adopted uncle.
We usually don't hit a town in Europe without doing his walking tour at least.
Like the very first thing we do when we get there to get oriented. Anyway, Uncle Rick says there are 2 Frances, Paris and the rest of the country.
Just like there's New York City and upstate New York, which is everything that's not New York City.
Exactly.
And those are very different places.
We talked about Paris in season 2 of our show. I'll put a link in show notes so you can revisit that. There are some really yummy books in that episode. I still think about The Godmother by Hannah Lorcaire a lot.
Yeah, in that episode, I told a story about some guerrilla artists who snuck into a church and fixed their clock.
Yeah, that was a really good story. We will put that in show notes so you can revisit Paris. But today is about the rest of it. The châteaux, coastlines, cathedrals, cuisine, mountains, and museums. That certain je ne sais quoi that is France. Prepare for me to sprinkle French phrases throughout this thing in a really annoying way. Let's start with a few geography basics.
Okay.
France is roughly the size of the U.S. state of Texas. On the west, it's bordered by the Atlantic Ocean. On the east, starting up north, there's Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. Then you hit the French Alps along the eastern border with Switzerland and Italy. In the south, the Pyrenees Mountains are along the border with Spain.
Oh, you swung past the Mediterranean Sea there, and now we're over on the sort of 7 o'clock side where you run into the Pyrenees?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before we launch into the sightseeing portion of our French adventures, a quick history lesson. I will make sweeping generalizations that would make a historian weep.
It's kind of the nature of the work here. We only have about an hour to cover a whole lot of France.
About 2,300 years ago, a Celtic tribe called the Gauls were the original settlers. Then Julius Caesar and the Romans showed up in 58 BCE. About a half century later, Germanic people called the Franks tossed out the Romans, and the area was rebranded Francia, which means land of the Franks in Latin. Fasten your safety belt. We're making a leap to medieval times now.
Okay.
Paris and the rest of France really stepped up their game. The monarchy was on the rise.
Yep.
This brought about courtly love and troubadour poetry.
Not to be confused with Courtney Love.
Exactly.
Yep.
Completely different thing.
Yep.
A lot more smudged eyeliner in the latter. Soaring cathedrals were built, starting with the Gothic Sens Cathedral in Burgundy in 1135. Fun fact, that beat Notre Dame in Paris to the punch by about 30 years.
Oh, good for them.
Then in 1337, the 100 Years' War started. I will sum up by saying that France and England were sworn enemies, and legend grew around a girl named Joan of Arc.
Yeah, I'll be talking about that in a bit.
In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Loire Valley exploded with châteaux, built first by kings and later by the rest of the nobility. When Louis XIV built the Palace of Versailles in 1631, that showed the world France had officially arrived as a superpower. But just 2 Louis later, Louis number 16 lost his head during the French Revolution.
Yeah, it turns out you can only lean on the poor for so long until they get really mad.
Yeah. The revolutionaries rallied under the slogan, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. Liberty, equality, brotherhood.
Yeah.
To overthrow the monarchy and to celebrate the technological advance of the guillotine.
And that motto still has weight in France.
It does. I mean, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Then there's Napoleon's romp through Europe, ending in 1815 with his defeat at Waterloo. But France rose again, giving us Impressionist art, haute couture, and the French baguette.
And the 2001 romantic comedy, Amélie.
Truly, we are all grateful. Now that we've got some history in our back pocket,
Yep.
it's time for our road trip around France.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. We're going to start in the Northeast and travel clockwise.
Okay.
The itinerary I put together is filled with things that captured my imagination that I was excited to share with everyone. If we were in the car together, I would probably also commandeer the radio and force us all to listen to a playlist of French pop songs. We're starting in Alsace, in the northeastern part of the country.
So if France is a clock, Alsace is at about 2 o'clock.
Correct. The Alsace region snuggles up against Germany, so the architecture and food have a decidedly German slant. The towns are filled with charming, half-timbered houses that look like they popped out of the pages of Grimm's fairy tales.
Yeah.
And they're really cute, but back in the day, the exposed timbers were soaked in vinegar and then coated with ox blood for waterproofing.
And witch-proofing.
You can still see the faint red tint in some of the older buildings. In the town of Colmar, we'll take a lazy canal boat ride that winds past the pastel-colored houses. Afterward, we'll sip a cold glass of Alsatian white wine and dig into food like rasti. That's a potato pancake baked with cheese. Or choucroute garnie. That's a big pile of sauerkraut that's cooked with goose fat, juniper berries, sausage, pork, ham, and potatoes.
That sounds fantastic.
Very hearty.
Yeah.
Good winter dish. Now we're on to Burgundy.
Burgundy's at about 3 o'clock, I think.
Correct. First, we're going to go on a bike ride along a canal and through the vineyards.
Oh, that's fun.
And do some wine tasting.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to have an epic picnic. Strawberries still warm from the sun, a fresh baguette from the boulangerie, brie from a local cheesemonger, and some chocolate.
Delightful.
Maybe we'll have a short nap under a tree, and then we'll cool off by wandering in the vaulted stone arches and gardens of the Abbey of Fontenay. It was founded in 1118 by Saint Bernard. He was an abbot and a mystic who also co-founded the Knights Templar.
He founded the Knights Templar.
He did. Co-founded.
Those are the guys in the Indiana Jones movies who run around and do secret stuff.
They're also the guys who fought in the Crusades.
Tomato, tomato.
Next, we could go to the French Alps for skiing in the winter, spectacular hiking the rest of the year, and fondue anytime.
So that's like 3 o'clock and then keep going.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're on our way to the Riviera.
which is, I think, 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock, we run into the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
For sun, sand, and tales of glamour and romance. We're starting in Nice with a stroll along the seafront promenade. There are pastel-colored Belle Epoque hotels, palm trees, and the perfect turquoise blue Mediterranean.
In my head, I always thought it was silly that Nice was nice. But then we saw Nice once, and it really is nice.
It really is nice. Also, that's delightful when you're like 8 years old.
Yeah.
Or 50.
Or 50, yeah.
Then we're off to Monaco and the district of Monte Carlo. And because this is our fantasy trip, we're also going to time travel back to the 1950s.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
why not?
Sure.
Monte Carlo was the playground of celebrities from all over the world who came to see and be seen, gamble, and relax in the picture-perfect weather of the Riviera. It's May 1955, and the beautiful American actress Grace Kelly has been invited to a photo session with Prince Rainier III at his palace in Monaco. But he kept her waiting for an hour.
The cad.
Mm-hmm. Finally appearing for the photo shoot, they posed for a photo where they're shaking hands and standing so far apart, their fingertips seem like they're barely touching, and their smiles are very tight.
I wonder what motivated that, them standing so far apart.
They just look really formal.
Yeah.
Like they're almost bending at the waist a little bit and doing a how do you do kind of thing.
Okay.
We can only assume that some sort of magic was happening under the surface, though.
Sure.
Because when the cameras were put away, the two walked alone in the garden, and Grace Kelly was apparently very charmed.
And Grace Kelly, of course, has the face of an angel.
She really does.
Like, literally.
Yeah.
Like, I hope I die and I wake up and I see Grace Kelly.
You could do worse.
Yeah.
The two of them kept up a secret correspondence and were married the following year in Monaco's St. Nicholas Cathedral.
An open Rolls-Royce waits to drive them on a tour through the streets of Monte Carlo. As handsome a couple as any teller of fairy tales could have described. The prince in his dark uniform with the shining epaulets, and the princess in her ivory gown with its 300 yards of lace and 150 yards of silk. So, a Hollywood...
Among the guests at the wedding were Ava Gardner, Gloria Swanson, and Cary Grant.
We saw Cary Grant with Grace Kelly in To Catch a Thief, I think it was.
Yeah, it's such a cute movie.
There's so much good face in that movie.
Yeah, they're adorable together.
Yeah.
The wedding was watched on TV by more than 30 million people around the world.
Wow.
Uh-huh. And that night, the prince and new princess embarked on a 7-week Mediterranean honeymoon cruise aboard the prince's yacht.
Living their best lives.
Mm-hmm. There are swanky photos of every bit of that story. I will put links in show notes.
Awesome.
Now, infused with romance, we continue to Provence.
On our French clock dial, Provence is about 6 o'clock.
Correct. We'll drive past endless purple fields of lavender, explore the best preserved Roman theater, and maybe play a game of boule with the locals before we make our way to Arles. In 1888, the painter Vincent Van Gogh fled cold gray winter in Paris for the warm green and gold fields of Provence. For 2 years, he churned out a new masterpiece every few days, including some you've probably heard of: Starry Night over the Rhone, Sunflowers, a handful of self-portraits, and The Yellow House.
We went to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and it was shocking to sort of see how quickly the images that we know and love from Van Gogh came to him.
Mm-hmm.
One afternoon, he knocked out the sunflowers. What?
The painting, The Yellow House, depicts the house where he lived in Arles, and it's now part of the Van Gogh Trail. So all throughout the town, there are about a dozen easels that depict his paintings alongside the real-life place that's in the picture.
Yeah, so you can stand where he stood and look at the painting and imagine what that would have been like.
Yeah, so we'll do that.
Yeah.
That seems fun.
That seems fun.
The next day, we could go to the Loire Valley.
Around 9 o'clock, continuing our sweep on the French clock face.
Yes. In the Loire Valley, We might ride a hot air balloon or tour one of the 300 châteaux, but we're on a mission.
Oh.
A mission to eat the best butter in the world.
I think we've been on this mission since we started.
It does kind of feel like my life's work right now. The best butter in the world is found in Brittany, in the small town of Saint-Malo.
So that's at 9 o'clock, but right on the coast there.
Exactly. Brittany kind of juts out into the Atlantic Ocean like a jaunty thumb.
Yep.
And Saint-Malo balances on its tip, battered by the sea. Literally.
Yeah.
Waves crash against stone ramparts built in the 12th century. They are the only thing separating the old stone houses from the foaming froth
of the sea.
When I saw a video of waves hitting this rust-colored stone wall, I think just randomly on Instagram, I thought, what is that and when are we going? And then I read this sentence on Atlas Obscura. You can walk the length of the ramparts in about an hour and then dip into the old city and follow its narrow cobblestone streets to La Maison de Beurre.
The House of Butter.
At this shop, France's most prized butter is pounded, shaped, and served up for sampling. The beurre d'algue is flecked with Breton seaweed, best enjoyed on a baguette overlooking the sea.
Yeah.
I'm sold.
Sure. Who wouldn't want to go there?
No exaggeration. We are going there for my birthday next year. In lieu of cake, I will eat an entire baguette spread with butter flecked with seaweed while waves lap at my toes.
It's a strong answer.
If you read and loved the novel All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, you might remember that Saint-Malo is the setting for that Pulitzer Prize winning story. It's all about an unusual friendship between a young French girl and a German soldier during World War II, and it is heartbreaking, but in the good way.
Yeah.
Brittany is also well known for two other awesome things, crepes and the Breton striped shirt.
Oh, that's where we get the sort of stereotypical blue and white horizontal striped French sailor shirt from.
Exactly. With our bellies and hearts full, we head north along the coast to Normandy, which is our last stop.
At about 11 o'clock, closing back in on Paris.
Yes. We could visit Rouen to see its Notre Dame Cathedral. The Gothic spires are spikier than the one in Paris, and it looks like a very artistic giant made one of those fancy dribble castles out of sand on the beach and then moved it inland.
Okay.
We could also visit the Bayeux Tapestry.
We could. I'm going to be talking about that in a minute.
We could also immerse ourselves in World War II history with museums, monuments, cemeteries, and battle remains found along the D-Day beaches.
Yeah.
Just to bring the room down for a moment.
A little bit.
But I've got my heart set on an island that looks like it rises out of the sea by magic. It's Mont Saint-Michel. For more than 1,000 years, the spire of its abbey has pierced the sky from on top of a hill, surrounded by higgledy-piggledy houses, all encircled by a stone wall. Mont Saint-Michel is a tidal island, so when the tide recedes, it's surrounded by mudflats and quicksand. You can sink into it up to your ankles.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the Bayeux Tapestry that illustrates an army doing exactly that.
But when the tide is in, the island seems to almost float between the air and the water.
We will have plenty of pictures of that in show notes.
On our trip, we're going to keep our feet dry and walk up to the Abbey. It's only 900 steps.
A mere 900 steps.
There are beautiful views and souvenir shops along the way. But even in the Middle Ages, that rambling route to the top would have been lined with trinket shops for pilgrims making the climb to the Abbey.
Medieval people buying t-shirts with French flags on them and such.
I think they were probably buying little saints' medals, but candles. After a tour of the church, maybe a peaceful sit on a bench, we'll make our way back down to a cafe to try one of Mont Saint-Michel's famed omelets. They're called La Mère Poularde, and they've been made the same way since 1888. The eggs are whipped in brass bowls, and I'll put a video in show notes. The chefs do it according to a rhythm. So it kind of takes on this really musical quality.
Nice.
And then they cook them over a wood-fired stove. So the end result is light and fluffy and buttery. One of the videos I watched said the omelet was like savory cotton candy.
That sounds really delicious.
They're also a little expensive.
I am not surprised.
Something like 35 euros for an omelet.
Wow.
Once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Why not?
Sure.
And with that delicious omelet, we conclude our road trip around France. C'est la fin de l'histoire.
That is the end of our story.
For now.
These are two truths and a lie.
Two truths and a lie, a game we play.
Now I'm about to say 3 statements. 2 of them are true. 1 of them is not. Mel doesn't know which one is a lie. So we all know what a baguette is, right? It's a delicious long stick of bread. French people are famous for carrying around, maybe on their bicycles and their blue and white stripe printing sweaters.
And berets.
Yeah, and a little pencil-thin mustache, as long as we're trafficking in stereotypes.
Literally wearing a beret right now.
So the statement is, the ingredients for a baguette are dictated by French law. Statement number 2, in France, it's possible for a living person to marry a dead person.
What?
Yep. And this last one needs a little context. You mentioned the Bayeux tapestry.
Mm-hmm.
The Bayeux tapestry is an embroidered piece of cloth. It's about 230 feet or 70 meters long. For context, that's about 90 human strides or maybe the length of a city block. And it's about 20 inches tall or about 50 centimeters. And it tells a story. It tells the story of the lead up to the Norman conquest of England in 1066. It is sequential art. There's a plot and reoccurring characters. There's text. It is arguably a graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
We can only guess where the tapestry comes from or who made it, but it's been around since at least the 1400s. It might date back to a few years after the Norman conquest. Experts believe that it might be fan art. They don't call it that, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's the 11th century version of a Tom Brady shrine. The tapestry is currently in Bayeux, which maybe you got from the name. Bayeux is a small town on the west coast of France. I'm probably weak with my pronunciation, but there it is. The population in Bayeux has been within a few thousand people of 10,000 for the last 200 years. Yeah. But they have a charming museum there to protect the tapestry. And climate control and state-of-the-art security and audio tours in 16 languages, that kind of thing. Here's the statement, finally.
I'm ready.
There is an exact replica of the Bayeux tapestry in Reading, England. So let's go through those statements one at a time. The first one, the ingredients of a baguette are dictated by French law.
I think that's true because I think it is a national treasure.
That is true, both of those things. The French have a complicated and rich relationship with their baked goods. During the French Revolution, one of the primary complaints was the lack of bread. The aristocrats were eating all of the good stuff, and the poor people had to make do with bread that was barely edible. For instance, there are stories of loaves that were at least partially dirt.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This inequity led us to the unfortunate let them eat cake bit.
Whoopsie.
Yep. That's attributed to Marie Antoinette, although Wikipedia informs me that she probably never said it. Rousseau likely made it up, and he was trying to smear an earlier royal. And what he wrote was, let them eat brioche.
Which is not cake.
Yeah. So that one line is like 3 lies.
Yeah.
The baguette, though, only became what we know it today because of the labor movement in the 1920s. It was decided then that it should and would be illegal for bakers to work between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So the bakers are happy to get a night's sleep, but now they have to get a loaf of bread ready for the morning crowd. And a couple of hours isn't going to cut it for the old loaves they were making.
Right.
That's when they discovered they could make the bread thinner and longer, and that would speed up the baking time. Clever.
And that's how you get that beautiful crispy crust in every bite.
Yeah. And now we have the baguette. Legislation in 1993 decreed that an authentic baguette could only be made with wheat flour, water, salt, and yeast. That also needs to be...
No dirt.
And no dirt. 0 dirt. It also needs to be sold in the same place where it's made.
Interesting.
Yep. And it can't have preservatives or be frozen, for God's sake. So the baguette goes from peak, crusty on the outside, chewy on the inside, to stale like a rock within about 24 hours, and many say 12. Did legislating the ingredients make all the baguettes the same?
I'm going to say no.
It did not. There are still annual competitions for the best bakers. CNN reports that the 2023 competition in Paris had 176 entries.
How would you possibly keep all of those slices of baguette straight?
Yeah.
I would just be like, this one's good. Oh, also good. Yes, this one's delicious too.
Also crunchy. Also delicious on the inside. Those baguettes were judged by a jury of 18. 18 people had to worry about the problem you're just talking about. This list strikes me as particularly French. The 18 people were made up of previous winners, baking union officials, food bloggers, and 6 Parisians who were randomly picked from over 1,200 applicants.
That is awesome. How much do you want to sit at a table with some wine with those 6 people?
And hear their thoughts on baguette.
And life.
Yeah. The winner that year was a Sri Lankan man.
Really?
Yeah. He runs a bakery in a tiny corner of Paris's 20th arrondissement. He says his bakery's secret is to bake a fresh batch every 20 minutes.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. You can change your life with one of his prize-winning baguettes for about $1.50. While we're at it, I should mention that the baguette has UNESCO's World Heritage status.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Google Arts and Culture, more than 300 baguettes are sold every second in France. That's more than 27 million a day or 10 billion a year.
Someone is eating my share of French baguette.
Easily. All right, statement 2. In France, it's possible for a living person to marry a dead person.
That sounds too crazy for you to have made it up, so true.
That is true. You need permission from the deceased's family and the president of France, but it's possible.
Why would I want to do this thing?
Okay, so before the last century, it was done when women were pregnant with the children of soldiers who had been killed in action.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah. Posthumous marriage for civilians started in the 1950s when a dam broke and killed 400 people. The dead included one man who was engaged at the time. His fiancée petitioned Charles de Gaulle and got his permission. The parliament drafted laws about it, and since then, hundreds of people have filed, men and women. During the wedding ceremony, the living spouse frequently stands next to a picture of the deceased. The mayor conducts the ceremony, and instead of reading the dead person's vows, he reads the presidential decree. As soon as the ceremony is over, the living spouse is now legally a widow or a widower and a member of the dead person's family.
This has such Gothic vibes.
It really does. Yeah, it strikes me simultaneously as sort of spooky and Gothic and also very humane.
Yeah.
It is spooky when you think about sort of the general marrying a dead person, but humane when you think about someone who would want to marry a dead person and the state allowing it. Posthumous marriage happened recently in 2017 when 2 men were married after one of them, a police officer, was killed by a terrorist.
You're trying to make me cry, and you're going to succeed soon.
I will move off of this, but not before saying that France is not alone in this practice. Under certain conditions, it can happen in China, India, Japan, and a few other places. Finally, the last statement. There is an exact replica of the Bayeux Tapestry in Reading, England.
We know this is the lie.
Yeah, it is false. So there seem to be life-size copies of the tapestry just about everywhere.
Huh.
Yeah, there's one in Ontario at the University of Waterloo and another in an abbey in Denmark. Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones drummer, owned a Victorian copy of the tapestry until his death. The Bayeux Museum bought that one for £16,000 sterling. Why they want two, I don't know. One to keep, one to trade, maybe.
Sounds like the beginning of a caper where they get switched.
Also, I feel like we've mentioned Charlie Watts like 3 or 4 times during the course of this show for entirely different reasons.
Very interesting man.
Yeah. There are other copies, but the effort for one of the first copies was headed up by a woman called Elizabeth Wardle back in 1885. She organized 37 women to create a copy from a full-scale watercolor facsimile. That watercolor was provided by what was then the South Kensington Museum and is now the Victoria and Albert, which is a huge decorative arts museum in London. That full-size replica was completed in about a year, and it now hangs in the Reading Museum. That copy, though, is not identical to the original Bayeux tapestry.
What?
Yeah. There are naked figures in the original.
And the puritanical Victorians covered them up?
Whoever did the watercolor that the women were working from decided that that was too much, a bridge too far. And whoever it was painted clothes on the naked figures, and then the women faithfully recreated that. If you want to know more about the tapestry, both the museum in Bayeux and the one in Reading have very rich websites. Both museums have their respective tapestries online with lots of detail. The one in Reading is also annotated. We will point to both. If you want to see the tapestry in person, you can see it in Bayeux, but only for a limited time. They are packing it up to send it to the British Museum sometime soonish.
Really?
Yeah.
For good or for an exhibit?
For an exhibit. It was supposed to be there by now, but from what I gather online, it's running a bit late. It will be the first time in about 900 years that the tapestry will be outside of France. While it's away, there's a major remodel of the Bayeux Museum that is expected to be complete in 2027. If you can hold your patience until then, definitely worth checking out. That is Two Truths and a Lie.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Here comes 5 books we love. Nothing better than 5.
This is book 1.
My first recommendation is Clara Reads Proust by Stéphane Carlier, translated from French by Polly McIntosh. This is a quick read. It's about 200 pages. It's got whimsy and sweetness without being saccharine, and you will wish you could magically leap into the pages. It's like Wes Anderson and Amélie went on a date in a storybook town in France.
I mean, I'm so sold on this already.
I think you would really like this one.
Yeah.
It's set in a small city in Burgundy, Chalon-sur-Saône. So I want you to close your eyes and picture a town infused with golden light on the banks of a river with weeping willows touching the surface of the water, and a pretty cobblestone square lined with half-timbered houses and a Gothic cathedral.
Is there a bakery?
Oh, definitely.
That's very exciting.
In a hidden nook, tucked down a passage, is the Cindy Coiffure Salon. It's been there since 1982, and the nonstop soundtrack is Radio Nostalgie, a station devoted to hits from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's currently run by Madame Habib, née Jacqueline Delange. She smells of Shalimar, cigarettes, and hairspray. But she's convinced herself she's running a posh salon. The truth is, as the narrator says, it only survives thanks to a customer base of loyal regulars whose average age is 70.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And this is where our heroine, Clara, spends her days, giving the same hairstyles to the same people and keeping up a running internal monologue about her quirky coworkers.
Yeah.
She has a boyfriend named JB who makes everyone else swoon. He's like a Disney prince. Floppy black hair, six-pack abs, skin that shows no signs of aging, and he's a firefighter.
In my head, I went to Gaston from Beauty and the Beast.
They describe him as Flynn Rider from Tangled.
Oh, I was close.
You were close. He also remembers to buy Clara flowers on special occasions.
That's
so,
nice.
I mean, on paper, he's perfect.
Yeah.
But 3 years into their relationship, the glow is kind of fading for Clara.
Mm-hmm.
This is how she sees him now. A man who drinks a little too much the night before his days off, who hardly speaks to his father and sometimes has fights in his sleep, spewing terrible insults. A man she no longer desires. There you have it, the stubborn little cloud on the horizon of her existence. Her Flynn Rider, the mere mention of whom would once send shivers all the way down to her little toe, is now as tempting as a plate of cold meats after the Christmas turkey. She looks at his mouth and the corner that tends to rise of its own accord, the light brown of his eyes and the bounce of his hair, and she feels nothing.
Cold meats after the Christmas turkey.
Harsh.
That's sad.
Clara is in a rut, a muddle. She's stuck.
Yeah.
Then one day, a stranger comes into the salon. He arrives in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon without an appointment. Clara can tell right away that he isn't from around here, and she decides that he must be an artist or an actor. They don't speak as she shampoos and cuts his hair, but a pop song she likes is playing on the radio, and when their eyes meet in the mirror, they both smile. This one, she thinks to herself, she would still fancy after 3 years.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a romance.
Sure.
I was half right.
Okay.
When the mystery man leaves, he accidentally forgets his copy of Proust's Swan's Way.
Oh.
And when Clara flips through it, she sees this sentence underlined. You have a soul in you of rare quality, an artist's nature. Never let it starve for lack of what it needs. And that is the beginning of Clara falling in love with reading and with life and eventually with herself.
Well, that sounds delightful. It's a romance story with herself.
And books.
Yeah.
To tell you anything else about what happens would ruin the fun. But I can say that it's filled with small moments of high drama. Many of them are very funny. Some are sad, just like real life. And the story unfolds through slice-of-life vignettes, and it's sprinkled with quotes from Swan's Way. So you get a taste of In Search of Lost Time without needing to tackle Proust yourself.
Did it make you want to read Proust?
Did it? I don't think so.
Okay.
But her love for this book is infectious in that it did make me think about what book I might adopt and have an ongoing relationship with, to get to know every nuance, write in it,
Yeah.
evangelize for it with other people, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of made me want to find my book. And I might already have that book with Jane Eyre.
Yeah, you do. A little bit. I thought about reading Proust for this episode, and then I realized that there was way too much Paris in Proust, and it made me a little sad. But maybe someday.
Someday. There are a small number of books on the list of novels that make me happy to be a human. Things like Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel.
Yeah.
A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Almost Maine by John Cariani.
Wow, I didn't realize that Almost Maine made that height for you.
I really enjoyed that book.
Huh.
And now this one.
All right.
This is Clara Reads Proust by Stéphane Carlier and translated by Polly McIntosh.
Book 2.
My first book is Joan, a novel by Catherine J. Chen. This is a novelization of the life of Joan of Arc. It does for Joan what Wolf Hall does for Thomas Cromwell in the court of Henry VIII.
Cool.
Yeah. When I started this book, I didn't know much about Joan of Arc, and my apologies if you already do. I'm going to briefly run through it. The legend starts back in the 1400s during the 100 Years' War. England is trouncing France. Henry V controls everything north of the Loire, which is more than half of France. Mm-hmm. France itself is divided. There are two factions, one that believes that Charles VII should inherit the throne, and another that wants Charles's sister to marry Henry V and unite France and England.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Things are a little tense between the siblings.
I would imagine.
Uh-huh. And into the middle of this comes Joan of Arc. She is a poor girl from a small village. She's about 17. She claims to be guided by visions of angels and saints. She gets an audience with Charles VII and tells him she will help save France from English domination. For very unclear reasons, he's like, yeah, that sounds good.
I'll put my faith in this teenage girl.
Yep. And he sends her to Orleans. Orleans has been under siege. She gets there in April of 1429. 9 days after she arrives, the English abandon the siege. They had lockdown on Orleans. 9 days after she gets there, they're like, maybe later. She encourages the French to chase them down, and they have another decisive victory at a village called Patay. This change in fortune shifts French morale hard. Mm-hmm. First, they're winning battles, and that's always good. Second, this new right hand of God in the form of Joan is now backing Charles.
Mm-hmm.
That plays really well. And Charles is quickly crowned King of France. Joan is standing next to him when he is handed the scepter. This all happens at Rheims Cathedral, which still stands. You can walk in the footsteps of Charles and Joan of Arc there. But just as quickly as all of that, Joan's fortune turns. She participates in 2 more battles. Both of those go poorly. At a third, she's captured by some French who are loyal to England.
Mm-hmm.
They put her on trial. She's accused of heresy and blaspheming by wearing men's clothes, among other things. She's found guilty, and she's burned at the stake in May of 1431 at the age of about 19. Mel is shaking her head and looking a little sad.
None of the things I want to say are for polite company.
Yeah, yeah. Since then, Joan has had another turn of fortune. A court overturned the verdict 25 years after she was found guilty, so historically quickly.
Mm-hmm.
In 1920, she was canonized by the Roman Catholic Church, and 2 years later, she was declared one of the patron saints of France. There are only 2 other patron saints of France, and one of them is Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Wow.
Competition is high.
Wow.
For that.
I will also add to her accolades that Zendaya dressed as her at the 2018 Met Gala. And it's one of my favorite Met Gala outfits ever.
It is a really good outfit. So the novel explores Joan's story. Who is this girl, and why is she a fighter, and what drives her? And maybe the most interesting question, when did the legend start?
Mm-hmm.
Because at one point she was a 16-year-old girl in a tiny village in France, carrying water and chopping wood. And then 3 years later, she was on a path to be the patron saint of France. How does that happen? The book is almost 3 books. It starts as a coming-of-age story. There's a strong sense of 15th century France. The village has strong ties to nature. The residents live in houses where you can hear your neighbors laughing and crying, a detail I'd never really thought about until I was here.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yep. These are hard lives. There's also a short investigation into the otherworldliness of cinnamon at that time. The book then becomes a military story as Joan goes off to battle. Jen tells us about what battle looked like then. And finally, there's court intrigue, right? What was it like to be Charles VII or in his circle? And what happens when Joan starts to fail? What happens when it becomes clear that she is not the sword of God? It all worked really well for me together. The book has interesting things to say about Joan and her times and the creation of a legend, but there were two bits in particular that were sort of amazing to me. And I don't want to spoil the book, but there are these two scenes that do a sort of a magic trick. And the trick is nowhere in the legend that I just told you does it say that these two scenes take place. Both of the scenes involve Joan talking to influential people. There are no dialogue scenes in the legend.
Right.
Right. And yet, having read the book, I firmly believe that in history, these two scenes took place. She had those conversations in one way or another. It might not have been as direct as it is in the book, but it feels right somehow.
Wolf Hall has that same feeling where Hilary Mantel has imagined whole conversations and they just have so much veracity emotionally, and the actual events in the world follow from those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do find myself talking about these characters and the things they say as if they actually said them.
Yeah, it's exactly that, right? There's turns in the story, turns in the legend where it's like, how would a 16-year-old girl from the middle of nowhere get to where she was going without this conversation? And as a writer, like, imagining the writer getting to that point, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Good job. So the author is currently working on her next book. It's about the complicated sibling relationship between King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay.
Oh, that sounds really fun.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see what she's going to do with it. This book is Joan, a novel by Catherine J. Chen.
Here's book 3.
My next recommendation is Murder on the Ile Sordou by M.L. Longworth. This is a great book to read if you wish you could hop on a plane for the south of France right now.
When do I not wish I could hop on a plane to the south of France?
I mean, we do live in a pretty magical place.
It's not the south of France, though.
Okay, imagine you're in Marseille.
Yep.
It's a clear, sunny day. The light is sparkling on the dark blue sea, and you step onto a boat bound for an island off the coast. The wind is in your hair. You take in the view of Marseille fading away in the distance, and you secretly observe the other passengers on the boat.
Okay.
You're all on the way to the grand reopening of the Loconda Sordou Resort. And as you approach the island, you see a pink hotel with curving balconies sitting on top of a hill. This is the setting for the cozy-ish murder mystery. And it's the 4th installment in the Verloc and Bonnet Provençal series. The books in this series are all set in southern France, in and around the city of Aix-en-Provence. And the author makes the settings characters in the stories. She does a really good job weaving in culture, history, and cuisine. The hero of the series is Antoine Verloc. He's a judge in Aix-en-Provence. And he is never without his longtime lady love, Marine Bonnet. She's a law professor. Antoine, conveniently, is very rich, thanks to his inheritance from the family flour mill. And he and Marine are like a French version of Jonathan and Jennifer Hart from the 80s TV show Heart to Heart.
Yeah.
They're very glamorous.
Yep.
They enjoy the good life. And even though they've been together for ages, they flirt with each other like they're only a few dates into their whole situation.
Oh, that's nice.
And wherever they go,
yeah,
a family chateau, an art museum, a theater, a vineyard, they get caught up in crimes.
Because when they met, it was murder.
In this one,
yep,
I should say they don't need to be read in order at all. And in this one, Antoine and Marine are meant to be on holiday on Ile Sordou. As they sip champagne at a welcome reception in the cocktail lounge, they're reunited with Marine's best friend. And they catch up on the gossip. And they're informed there's no cell reception on the island. Let's just call that Chekhov's Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
As they have their cocktails, they're meeting the other guests and the staff. There's an American couple who's very like, "Aw, shucks, honey," about the hotel and the scenery.
All right.
And a Parisian couple who is definitely not that.
Yeah.
There's a famous actor who is past his prime, along with his latest wife and her troubled son, and the three of them are already bringing the drama. There's also a retired French teacher who's a wannabe poet and loves the works of Frank O'Hara, plus the owners, who have some tension between them, seemingly,
Okay.
and the rest of the staff.
All right.
When I read mysteries with a closed circle of suspects like this, I always cast them like a movie so I can keep all the characters straight.
Yeah.
So in my mental movie, Michael Sheen with a French accent is playing Antoine.
Mm-hmm.
And Marion Cotillard is Marine. I also cast Chris Pine as the boatman / gardener.
Okay.
And Jeremy Allen White from The Bear as my chef.
I feel like you have a very tight, closed company of actors for your book casting.
I do. I'm like Wes Anderson. I get my favorite people and I just cast them in everything. The guests and staff are deliciously irritable, and there are early hints that things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Petty arguments everywhere, even though they're in paradise. The young boy goes missing. A creepy lighthouse keeper shows up in the middle of dinner, mumbling cryptically. And then, as you've probably guessed by now, one of the guests is murdered.
Yeah.
Naturally, everyone except Antoine and Marine are suspects. The author M.L. Longworth does a few things really well with the tropes of this kind of Golden Age-inspired mystery. First, the setting is glorious. The descriptions of the scenery and the hotel transported me right there. Second, she gives all of the characters compelling backstories. So even though I was making fun of them, it's not just the American, the actor, the Parisian.
Right.
They're well drawn with strong motivations, which makes them all legitimate suspects. And third, the energy is kind of kooky. After the murder, in the throes of the investigation, when everyone's freaking out because someone has been murdered, Antoine decides to throw a dinner party.
Oh.
Because he thinks if he gets everyone a little drunk and relaxed, they might slip up and share some kind of clue.
Yeah.
And of course, during the party, there's a raging storm and the lights go out. It's like a deranged version of Clue.
Yeah.
And a little bit farcical.
That's fun.
But it's not all laughs.
No.
The investigation actually goes into some dark places and unearths buried secrets. It's like how on Midsummer Murders, like all of the murders are done off screen or are bloodless.
Yeah.
And then when they actually start talking to the people, like dark stuff comes out.
Yeah.
You're like, maybe just let me see the stabbing and spare me the betrayal. Before they've gotten to the bottom of what's going on, there's another murder.
Oh.
And then the story ends with the classic reveal where Antoine gathers everybody together in the bar and explains how everything went down. Very satisfying. I should also mention that the series has been adapted for TV. Oh. It's called Murder in Provence. It does not star Michael Sheen as Antoine, but it's still fun.
Big miss there.
Yeah. I'll put the trailer in the show notes. The book is Murder on the Ile Sordue by M.L. Longworth.
Book 4.
My next book is A Woman of No Importance, The Untold Story of the American Spy Who Helped Win World War II by Sonia Purnell. This book is about a woman who was dropped into occupied France and became a resistance fighter and a spy master. She had no background in any of that. Virginia Hall grew up in a middle-class family in Baltimore. Before her life as an asset for an international spy organization, she had been an executive assistant and an ambulance driver.
Wow.
Yeah. And Hall was missing half a leg. Yep. She had a clunky mid-20th century wooden prosthetic below her left knee. This book is a ride. Hall goes into a dark situation. Early in the book is this bit. It says, "No one in London gave Hall more than a 50-50 chance of surviving even the first few days."
Wow.
For all of Virginia's qualities, dispatching a one-legged 35-year-old desk clerk on a blind mission into wartime France was on paper an almost insane gamble. Her mission, codenamed Operation Geologist 5, would expose her to grinding fear and the perpetual likelihood of a grisly death. There was no reception committee to welcome her or ready circuit for her to join, but she was permitted, even obliged, to commit a range of crimes from subversion to murder. To survive, she must lead her double life to perfection and avoid capture at all costs. Her disability might help protect her in that she made such an unlikely agent, but at the same time, it rendered her more conspicuous.
Did she know they were only giving her a 50-50 chance?
I don't think she knew that. She may have had thoughts. But she went in. She claimed to be a journalist for the New York Post, but in truth, she worked for the British Special Operations Executive, the SOE. Soon after she got there, a dozen SOE agents were arrested in Lyon, leaving her almost the sole agent in Vichy, France. Yeah, I know, right?
My jaw just dropped open.
Miraculously, Hall gets the job done. She manages to recruit people and inspire and direct and fight the power and really piss off some Nazis and save some lives and generally be a fantastic human. Part of this book is almost competence porn. You are just amazed that this woman is carrying this off. But also, this book has a good feel for what it's like to be a resistance fighter in France during World War II. It's scary.
That seems terrifying.
There are betrayals and captures. Friends disappear, sometimes overnight. Whole cities become unlivable. The book gives a very good impression of how claustrophobic World War II spy work must have been. There are amazing stories in this book. Hull runs all kinds of missions, from sabotage to rounding up supplies dropped from planes to training little pockets of resistance fighters. She gets a reputation for busting people out of prison, so that comes up a few times. She eventually leads teams of guerrilla fighters to liberate France. Like she's driving around in jeeps with guys with guns looking for Nazis.
Oh my gosh, she's a hero.
Yeah. There's also a story of when things got so bad she had to escape France because the Nazis are airdropping posters with her photo.
No.
That say, "The enemy's most dangerous spy. We must find and destroy her."
Whoa.
Yeah. And the way she escapes is to cross over the mountains between France and Spain, the Pyrenees, by foot on a wooden prosthetic. Largely unprepared.
Those are not little hills.
No. There's a quote in the book from Chuck Yeager. He's the test pilot who broke the sound barrier.
Mm-hmm.
He made that trip later in the war. And of that walk, he said, "The climb is endless, the bitch of bitches." The author describes a whole lot of fascinating people throughout the book. There's a Madame in Lyon with expensive tastes and a huge collection of black cats. One of the cats follows her around everywhere. She and Hall become close friends. There's a race car driver and an acrobat and members of high society. It all creates this sort of larger-than-life, fascinating and frequently terrifying picture of World War II France. And then the war ends. One of the things that I've often wondered about is what happens to everyone after the war is over.
Right.
When they're trying to recover and get back to normal.
And you've done all these extraordinary things, and particularly for a woman, then you're just back to a normal
Here's a desk.
life.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of work to shake the feelings off.
Mm-hmm.
If you can ever do that. And for many, their situations have changed dramatically. They've lost their homes and their livelihoods. They've suffered significant loss. The grief has to be just immense. And how do you get back to a new normal once you've experienced something like that? This book follows Virginia Hall through the rest of her professional life with the CIA. There she fights what NPR calls, quote, "the mundane tyranny of sexism that stymied her career." This is a rich, full-blooded biography of a remarkable woman. If you're curious about the French resistance or the early days of the CIA or just this one extraordinary woman, I'd recommend it. It's A Woman of No Importance, The Untold Story of the American Spy Who Helped Win World War II by Sonia Purnell.
And now book 5.
My final recommendation is Freshwater for Flowers by Valérie Perrin and translated by Hildegard Searle. This book feels very French to me because it tackles big life themes like love and death and swings from whimsy to heartbreak, sometimes on the same page. It's set in a cemetery in a small town in Burgundy in the 1980s and 90s. And it's populated by characters who are very charming and eccentric, but still feel like real people. The narrator is Violette Toussaint. Her first-person voice feels even more intimate than usual because she's very forthright and unself-conscious. Rather than describe her myself, I want to read you the book's opening. Dave, I'm pretty sure I made you listen to this when I was reading the book the first time around.
This is one of those so good you have to stop eating your breakfast and listen to what I'm reading.
It is.
Passages.
It is. It's also one of those, this is so good I have to put it down for a minute.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Here's how Violette introduces herself.
Okay.
My name is Violette Toussaint. I'm a cemetery keeper. I savor life. I sip at it like jasmine tea sweetened with honey. And when evening comes and the gates to my cemetery are closed and the key is hanging on my bathroom door, I'm in heaven. Not the heaven of my closest neighbors. No, the heaven of the living. A mouthful of the port, 1983 vintage that Jose Luis Fernandez brings me every September 1st. A remnant of the holidays poured into a small crystal glass, a kind of Indian summer that I uncork at around 7 p.m., come rain or snow or gale. 2 thimblefuls of ruby liquid. I close my eyes and enjoy. A single mouthful is enough to brighten my evening. My present life is a present from heaven, as I say to myself every morning when I open my eyes. I have been very unhappy, destroyed even, non-existent, drained, without the weight of my soul, which apparently, whether you're fat or thin, tall or short, young or old, weighs 21 grams. But since I've never had a taste for unhappiness, I decided it wouldn't last. Unhappiness has to stop someday.
It's a nice piece of writing.
Mm-hmm. This book is beautiful.
Yeah.
So, despite tragedy,
Yep.
Violette has shaped a good life for herself that's marked by small pleasures. Then one day, a detective named Julien knocks on her door, and he is about to unsettle every aspect of Violette's life. Julien has a mystery about his own life to unravel, and he's the catalyst for Violette to unearth her past, too. As she does, we see her daily life at the cemetery, and slowly we learn her backstory, her very difficult upbringing, her no-good husband who's gone on the lam, and the one terrible day that tore a hole in her heart. We meet the friends who now form her social circle.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this set up to a joke. 3 undertakers, 3 gravediggers, and a priest walk into a cemetery. The gravediggers are very quirky and very kind. There's No-No, who's amused by everything and never says no. There's Gaston, who is the embodiment of clumsiness, like he routinely trips and falls during funerals.
Yikes.
Yeah. And Elvis, who can't read or write but knows all of Elvis Presley's lyrics by heart. Violette lives in a little house inside the cemetery gate and thinks the souls buried around her are her neighbors. She takes her commitment to them very seriously, and her door is always open to cemetery visitors for a coffee or something stronger. And she has a drawer where she has journals from every year that she's been the cemetery keeper, where she carefully notes the details of each funeral. So alongside the date and name of the deceased, she makes notes about the weather, whether or not there was a priest, how many people came, how long they stayed, and anything unusual that might have happened, just in case someone comes along who missed the funeral.
Oh, that's nice.
So sprinkled throughout Violette's story you get the stories of people buried in her cemetery. This part, I had to set the book down after I read this part. She has 2 wardrobes that she calls summer and winter, but has nothing to do with the actual seasons. Her summer clothes are light fabric and bright colors, and she wears them underneath and then layers her winter clothes that are gray and black and brown on top so that when she meets the bereaved, she's not wearing bright colors on their sad day.
Yeah.
Here's another example of this book cracking my heart open.
Okay.
She's had a horrible childhood and not a great beginning to her adult life. So she's never been on a holiday. She's never gone on vacation. She makes a new friend. And the first time she goes on holiday to the Mediterranean Sea, she rolls down the window and just starts sobbing at its beauty. And she says, "Over the 10 days, I don't think we put shoes on. That's it. I've understood what holidays are about, not putting shoes on anymore."
Oh, that's really lovely.
I loved Violette so much. I found her really moving because she's kind and she keeps her heart open, even though she had to claw her way back to life after this terrible thing that happened to her. Being very careful about not saying what the terrible thing is, but it's bad.
Yeah.
And it happened.
Yeah.
She deliberately chose to pursue goodness and happiness and to be grateful and connect with other people and fill her life with day after day of these small acts of bravery. I was kind of wrecked for a few days after I finished this book, like for real.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
But I feel like it opened up my heart with happiness and sorrow, and it didn't close again for a while. So I was just feeling everything very strongly for, say, 3 days.
That's a really impressive piece of writing when something can do that.
It was great.
Yeah.
And I would do it again.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'd have to set aside time to do that. If you've read and loved Still Life by Sarah Winman from our Italy episode, you will probably really enjoy this one too. It's Fresh Water for Flowers by Valérie Perrin, translated by Hildegard Searle.
Those are 5 books we love set in France. Visit our show notes at strongsenseofplace.com. We will have pictures of Grace Kelly.
And the video of the Bayeux Tapestry animated.
Yeah, and we'll have links about getting into the Cannes Film Festival next year.
Also, if you would like to join other readers who love books and travel, please join us on our free Substack for great discussions every week. And consider supporting us on Patreon because your support helps us keep making this show.
Mel, where are we headed for our next episode?
We're going to New York City.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey folks, we're the hosts of Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge. I'm Yen, a reader, writer, liver, and breather of comic books.
And I'm Nat. I used to know absolutely nothing about comics, but now...
So actually, I've got a quiz for you.
I still have a lot to learn about comics.
Thank you. On Comic Sans, I make Nat read some of my favorite works in the medium, including Saga, Daredevil, and The Flintstones.
And Yen talks about what makes that comic special. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's...
Paneling, gutters, page turns, colorings, lettering, semiotics, juxtaposition.
Okay, Professor, save it for the episodes.
You can listen to Comic Sans on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can binge our first 2 seasons. That's over 20 episodes on 20 different comics.
And we just launched Season 3, new episodes every 2 weeks.